Just a quick intro to a couple of excerpts I saw just recently. One is from Media Roots Radio with Abby Martin and Robbie Martin, and Robbie Martin are talking about how Silicon Valley basically are closing in on leftist journalism. Twitter is openly propping up the national security state. They make no secret of it now, that in their rules that anything that's interfering with NATO basically is a problem to Twitter, and you can only see the way Twitter goes, basically censoring anything that interferes with the Democratic Party, and props up the China narratives, the anti-China narratives, the anti-Russian narratives, and so forth. In many ways, Twitter is sort of, you could almost say, a propaganda arm of the Democratic Party at this present time, as well as the US national security state, the military-industrial complex, and all of that. So, and it doesn't stop at Twitter. YouTube is a problem. Patreon is becoming a problem. It's basically laying down the law to certain people who are on Patreon, that they can't talk about certain things. It's sort of becoming, it's becoming very widespread, very obvious, and very problematic for the left. And then there's Jordan Chariton, who is talking about how he has to sit on a story, which is an explosive story, because he can't find any outlet that will publish it because it's not about Trump, or it's not something that they don't consider sensational, and therefore they're not interested in it. This is the corporate media I think he's talking about. There's no surprises there, but I think even an outlet which he doesn't have such a problem with is also reluctant to publish this. And of course he can't publish it because his outlet, along with Jen Dyes, who is the other person who co-founded Status Quo, they both cannot afford if a lawsuit comes after them, so they try and get it published through a media outlet that will cover them with insurance should the person who they're talking about, who they're exposing the corruption on, comes after them in a lawsuit. So that's a problem. And this is and also the fact that YouTube has been crushing via their algorithms, crushing sort of exposure of Status Quo, the leftist journalist outlet. They've been crushing them through algorithms, which is a sort of censorship. Even YouTube actually had taken down one of their videos, which was used by so many major outlets. It was of the Capitol attack, and it was an inside sort of view of basically through in this doorway, which was like a death struggle between the Stop the Steal MAGA protesters and the Capitol Police. And all these different major outlets used it. They're not being asked to have theirs taken down, but the original content, YouTube won't reinstate it. And it's probably one of their major videos that has gotten a lot of views. And so YouTube has basically, taken it down and won't put it back up. So this is sort of how it is now. The Silicon Valley, YouTube, Google, Twitter, and then other platforms which are a way of different leftist outlets getting money, getting donations, etc. It's all starting to close in. I mean, that sort of started happening. That was demonstrated when WikiLeaks sort of released a whole bunch of things about government corruption and war crimes. And this is many years ago. PayPal and I think it was MasterCard and all these different sort of credit card corporations refused to actually allow donations to go to WikiLeaks. You could see the rot already setting in then, and they've been doing it more and more and consolidating their position. And Silicon Valley is pretty much so in cahoots with the U.S. national security state now that you may as well call it an arm of the national security and a propaganda arm of the national security state. So, so Abby Martin talks about how what they might need to do should YouTube take down Empire Files, should there be no way of actually being able to release this information. To me, I don't really see how you can, apart from having your own website and uploading videos onto your own website, and also somehow being able to collect money. I'm not sure how. I don't really collect money for my channel, but it's a very, very small channel and insignificant. But if you had, if this was your income, getting monetization or getting donations, getting Patreon and all of that, I don't really know how you would work that out, particularly if they get credit card companies and PayPal and all of that to join in. And cryptocurrency is kind of unstable. So anyway, so it's a very concerning thing. And, Robbie Martin was talking about, sort of literally having a physical mail list. Well, that's not going to work if you're on an international level. I don't know if he meant that exactly as he meant it, but I'm just speaking from my own point of view that, if you've got an international base, I don't know if it's sort of not really feasible to have any sort of physical mail that goes out in any timely fashion either. So I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but I can see that it's important that people join up the actual website of these various, like mediaroots.org or statusquo.com and that sort of thing. And speaking of joining up, you can join up on my Substack. Of course, they're coming for Substack too, but until I see that that's on the horizon, you can join my Substack, and I'll leave a link in the information section, but you can just go Faint Signals from Vega on Substack. And also I have my own website, which I don't really do much posting from, but that's faintsignalsfromvega.com. So please check that out and subscribe to that just in case all else fails, and that's all that's left for me, because YouTube is, algorithms-wise is crushing. The majority of what I talk about is anti-imperialist stuff, and I talk about veganism as well, and I talk about some gender diverse issues as well as some other social justice issues too. But the majority is anti-imperialism, and I usually weave veganism in there as well. And one day, when they basically, of course, they won't be bothered with my channel really unless they just right across the board decide to delete everybody that's talking about that on YouTube. But my channel is so small, they wouldn't worry about it. But they are definitely closing in on things like Empire Files, Status Quo, and those various other places. And mind you, Status Quo doesn't really talk about anti-imperialism much, but they are sort of exposing corruption, and they're also getting out on the street, and it's an on-the-ground journalism site, and so, it's basically exposing a lot of, domestic issues and which are really problematic for the people, and that's going against the powers that be as well. So we need to support these leftist journalist sites so that they can survive, by donating to them, by getting on their monthly donation list and all that kind of thing. Minpress News is another one. There's a whole bunch of them that I mention on this site, and I tend to point out the ones that are needing the most help at a certain time. Without real journalism that is not partisan, that isn't propping up imperialism and all of that, without that, then we have what skerrick of democracy we have left will be gone. So thanks so much for watching. Please check out these two excerpts. I think you'll find them interesting. Bye for now.
Well, yeah, and then you have Twitter also coming out now and, deleting dozens of accounts, of course, for the crime of originating in Iran or Russia, there's never any proof to explain why dozens of accounts are purged randomly day to day for its nefarious association with quote unquote enemy states or whatever. But one of these statements, I think it was an actual Twitter press release, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it is. It's on there. You can click on it still.
Oh, wow.
You can go. It's the Twitter safety blog.
Do you want to read the quote, because it is pretty crazy.
Sure. It's from February 23rd, 2021. It says, disclosing networks of state-linked information operations. So you think, okay, maybe they're just going to say this is a state-run account, like they sort of selectively do, even though I guess they don't do that yet on RFE-RL, which is our state-run media agency. So that already shows that it's not really, real. But it says that basically their investigation found and removed a network of 69 fake accounts that can be reliably tied to Russian state actors. A number of these accounts amplified narratives that were aligned with the Russian government, while other subset of the network focused on undermining faith in the NATO alliance and its stability. Now, that's unclear if they're saying there that both of these groups of accounts they were monitoring and that they purged were both linked to the Russian government, or if one of them was linked to the Russian government and the other one was just undermining faith in the NATO alliance and its stability. Now, if they're just saying that these are all Russian-linked accounts and one of them was doing that, that doesn't sound as bad as the way that I originally read it, but that's still odd. Who is feeding them this information? Reliably tied to the Russian state actors? How? I mean, that's the part
Right.
that they don't say in here. Who are they working with? It says that they have a information operations archive, but they don't say who they're working with. They mention the IRA, the Russian troll agency. Oh, actually, no, here's what's crazy. They admit straight up that previously in September 30th, 2020, it says on Twitter, based on intel provided by the FBI, last night we removed approximately 130 accounts that appeared to originate in Iran. So who knows how often they're working with the state, and what does the state show them to do this? And do they just have someone from the state in their office? Like, how fucking incestuous is this? Actually, it's just very opaque.
It's just so disturbing that Twitter is just openly working in concert with like U.S. foreign policy goals to purge, quote unquote, like state affiliated actors without, again, any evidence whatsoever to show us what does this even mean? Like we already know that so many, hundreds of people have been purged that were just simply promoting like pro-Chavista talking points to counter the Venezuela coup narrative. And so of course, I don't think that this was proven that people were, and even if they were working with the Russian government, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, it's
right? Like why does Twitter have the right to take down accounts that are affiliated with the Russian government? Like even on its face, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I was just going to say, it should be obvious to anyone that it's just very oddly selective. When have you ever seen Twitter saying we had to take down 100 accounts because they were linked to the U.S. government? Or we had to take down
of course
this many accounts because they were linked to BP, trying to push propaganda saying that some oil spill wasn't bad. I mean, we already know that the shit's happening all the time. So why do they only go after U.S. adversaries on Twitter?
Yeah,
it's because it's probably an arm of the state. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know how exactly the getting into the weeds, how it exactly works, but it is. I mean, fucking is.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that they're saying the crime of undermining faith in the NATO alliance, like that's a good thing to undermine faith in the NATO alliance. That's really, really just revealing right there. That like is kind of the whole foreign policy shift between Trump and Biden in the first place is like Biden wants to build back up the NATO alliance in order to like economically weaken and isolate Russia and China because they want a unipolar world and they don't like the fact that Russia and China have gained strength because the U.S. had such imperial hubris that it got stuck in a quagmire of its own doing in the Middle East for the last 20 years. So it is just really strange to be like, they're undermining faith in the NATO alliance. It's like, why is that bad? Who gives a shit about the NATO alliance? I certainly don't give a fuck about the NATO alliance. That's a bad thing. It's a junior collaborators of the empire who are imposing U.S. empire and capitalism.
How many people below the age of 30 who like work at Twitter, like even remotely care about that? Like, that's a weird, outdated thing. Like nobody who's young actually has been like successfully brainwashed into believing that's important. That's like a older person's thing.
Oh yeah.
It's just it's just a weird thing for Twitter to even mention at all on their safety page. It's embarrassing.
Like, dude, it's like embarrassing. Yeah, exactly. It's like, who's writing these press releases?
Did Bellingcat write this? Did Alliance for Securing Democracy write this? Did the Brookings Institute write this? It feels like they did to me.
Right. And then you see this too, which is a think tank that you have often talked about, the CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This is a highly influential think tank directly funded by weapons contractors that a lot of Biden's team stems from, right? There's a revolving door between this think tank and Biden's administration. And it also has like, heavy hitters like Kissinger and Brzezinski, I think, like as advisors. But anyway, interesting new report came out from CSIS talking about public-private partnerships, aka big tech, alongside the U.S. government, need to, quote, expand its toolkit to defend the legitimate rights of political protesters globally, including preserving the digital rights of peaceful democratic activists while muting harmful mis- and disinformation from violent state and non-state actors seeking to tip the balance in various countries.
Well, that's interesting. That's state and non-state actors. So how do they define the other one? I mean, state actors is one thing, because it's like we don't fucking I've not seen any proof that the people who actually did the hack of the DNC, or even if that really indeed happened, was done by like the GRU yet.
Right.
Even if these are just like foreign hackers or something, or foreign networks doing this, like, we already know that like cyber attribution is very like spurious and hard to figure out. There's probably a lot of times where people use like something that appears to come from another country when it's actually, it comes from a completely different country. I mean, that probably is how they do it every time. How are they really determining these things? It's simply not believable that they have this clear of an idea of who these people are coming, what countries these people are coming from.
Well, right. And since everything's like in a digital space now, pretty much ever since I feel like the Egyptian uprising, like Twitter was heralded as like a protest tool and like a revolutionary iconic thing that you can actually like organize the revolution on, which we know is the opposite. The opposite is true, right? Obviously, it's a tool of the state. And this is just so clear. It's like they know how powerful these mediums are. And they're literally just writing up papers about how people who are opposing U.S. hegemony and like foreign policy goals in these countries need to be muted or purged from these networks. And the people who agree and align with U.S. foreign policy goals need to be highlighted and boosted, essentially. So it's quite cynical and just hilarious that this is just like laid out. Once you read these papers, it's just like, oh, okay, great. Like, but the difference is that, the U.S. typically uses organizations like USAID or the National Endowment for Democracy, in places like Ukraine and other places to actually fund opposition groups and just funnel hundreds of millions of dollars like they did in Venezuela to Juan Guaido. But this is just so much more nefarious because this is like tech companies who are pretending like they are not joined at the hip with the U.S. government. But when you see papers like this, it's quite obvious that they bow to whatever the U.S. government wants them to do. And you can go back to Google changing the algorithms right after the DNI report came out. But it just is like, this is just our world now, Robbie. And they're just openly saying that this is going to happen in the future whenever, quote unquote, mass protests or uprisings happen in countries that the U.S. wants to overthrow.
Yeah, it's just going to get worse and worse. And, I just don't think there's any way really to reverse it other than just not relying on these things. I mean, just today, Whitney Webb, who we've had on the podcast before, was hit with warnings from Patreon basically saying that she will have her account suspended if she doesn't remove COVID misinformation. Now, Whitney was given no actual examples of what to take down to have her account get back into good standing from Patreon. Pretty shitty. And the email saying, here are the examples of what you can remove, the section where it should show an example was actually literally blank. So that's what kind of customer service you get if you're caught in this net that's coming for pretty much everybody. It's not partisan. That's the thing that the right has hijacked this, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the fact that this is coming for all of us, and I think it is just something to seriously consider, and it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, we see that often on YouTube now. They're just arbitrarily taking down entire accounts, wiping them clean with no warning or explanation whatsoever and no recourse. In the past, they'll say like, okay, this video broke our terms of service and then you can appeal it, right? Or do something. But it's like some of these accounts that I've seen from people that are like smaller time alternative media figures, they can't even protest or appeal because their account doesn't exist. So they have no account to actually appeal it from. We're seeing it across the board, and it is very scary because Whitney's research is really solid. And when you're looking at something like YouTube, it's very obvious to me that accounts like Steven Crowder or, giant accounts that bring in tons of money for YouTube ads, they don't care about those accounts. They don't care about spreading deliberate misinformation or whatever, or like bigotry or harassment or whatever that violates their terms of service all the time. And we've talked about how YouTube is primarily responsible for peddling disinformation anyway. But not just about COVID, but about everything. Like the alt-right gateway, I'm very worried about Empire Files being taken down. It just is going to take one strike. Something about Israel. I'm waiting for the day, and it's going to be an absolute tragedy because I fear that I will have very little recourse. I'm a very small channel, and our entire livelihood depends on our YouTube, and we built it up for 5 years. There are semi-alternatives to YouTube, but we all know how difficult that would be to build it up from scratch on a different network. And so it is coming for all of us, and I don't know what the solution is other than we have to get back to like peer-to-peer building up of newsletters. So anyone who's listening to this right now, go to MediaRoots.org, sign up to our newsletter, because that is the most direct way to get our information, get our radio show. I mean, this could happen on SoundCloud too. This could happen to us for Media Roots Radio. We don't know.
Yeah, and also, I mean, let's just be real here too about what these social media networks encourage. They encourage clickbait. They encourage content that's not evergreen, that's just trying to chase every news headline in the day. They encourage things that are, in my opinion, behaviors that are sort of play into the sort of capitalistic system, the mainstream media, the way that they make money off of media. Like you're saying, like go back to the things that we know still work, even if even if somehow the internet is not even available to you, you could still go back to physical mailing lists. Even something like, like the Empire Files, what you guys are doing is great because you can release something like that on like a physical medium and it would still be watchable and still be important information to take in. Most of these YouTube political shows are not things you can watch on like a disc and still find entertaining. You would have to watch them like within a couple days that they came out. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, something people need to think about too. Like, what is your strongest work if you're doing this kind of work? And think about maybe even putting out a physical medium of some kind, or having something that you can, a physical product you can sell, even merchandise that you can just sell directly off your own website.
I was just going to say that with the surveillance state as pervasive as it is, and with everything that we do in terms of digital communication being spied on and surveilled by the government and by like corporate entities, we know that revolutionary organizing is not going to be done on Gmail or over Twitter or Facebook anyway. Social media is almost designed to make you just completely isolated and powerless and pessimistic, because it's just such an over inundation of our senses and overstimulation, and just like it's just a really, really disturbing mental trap in a lot of ways. So anyway, just going off on a complete rant here, but
yeah,
just a bad sign.
It is.
We have something that is so explosive, and we're literally, we can't get it published. We cannot get this story published. Not because we don't have the goods, but because in this country, these national outlets simply don't care about this story, which has to do with the Flint water crisis. Let me repeat that. There are national media outlets with tons and tons of resources that we have presented evidence of a criminal cover-up when it comes to Flint. Let me repeat that. Evidence of a criminal cover-up when it comes to Flint. And they're not interested. I've been told we don't have the resources. I've been told, this was a while ago. I've been told simply we're going to pass. It is mind-boggling. And I will be writing a book one day or doing a documentary just on the media. Because if you guys had access to our conversations with corporate media outlets just in the last 2 years that have killed at the last minute major stories pertaining to Flint, that have passed on major stories pertaining to Flint, literally asking me, is there a connection to President Trump? Is there an angle on Trump? It's not big enough that an entire city was poisoned and still without clean water. They wouldn't do it unless there was a Trump connection. Right this moment, we have a story that shows evidence was destroyed, evidence was hidden, and several other things that I'm not going to say until it's out. And I have outlets that either tell me we don't have the resources, we don't have the staff, we don't have this, we don't have that. Yet they're very, very quick to write 4,000 or 5,000 word articles on bullshit. And I'm not, at this moment, at this point in time, I am not going to name the outlet that I'm talking about because I don't want to bite the hand that might feed us. But there is an outlet, who I happen to respect, by the way, that literally this is sitting in their inbox and they are doing nothing. And to me, this is bigger than the fact that the story is about Flint. This is about, we have a corrupt media in this country. We have media that is mostly controlled by upper middle class white people who frankly don't give a shit about corruption and injustice in local communities. They only want to cover things that they find entertaining, like the Washington food fight between the Democrats and the Republicans and whatever bullshit is trending. That is our current media system. There are very, very few outlets out there that actually cover local, city, and state level corruption, that actually spend resources to spend human beings, also known as reporters, to local communities, to dig, to build sources. We are one of them. And I'm not going to lie to you, folks. I'm going to be perfectly honest. We got almost 500 people watching. I am going to be 100% straight with you. We're hurting. We are hurting. At the beginning of this pandemic, we were almost at 2,000 paid members. Paid membership is our model. Paid membership is our model. We were almost at 2,000 paid members. That is what we're down to now. You know, we've lost a lot of members simply because people are hurting economically and had to cut certain things out of their budget. And we totally get it. But we're hurting. We're losing members because of this pandemic. We're losing members because I'm not able to go in the field. We're losing members because, frankly, YouTube is hiding our content. And I try not to be like a lot of these people who send out daily emails. We need your help. Because I don't like, the boy who cried wolf constantly. But we do need your help. Because honestly, we're getting it from every corner right now. YouTube is throttling us. We got media outlets that literally will not publish bombshell stories that will help a community and expose the truth. Right now, I simply can't. I mean, if it were up to me, I'd be on the first plane to Mississippi right now. I would be in Mississippi, a large chunk of Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, does not have water for a month. I would be down there. But I at this point, I don't want to get on a plane until I'm vaccinated. And I want to be clear, and I talked about this on our members call. I want to be clear. It is, do you know how easy it would be to sell out? Do you know how easy it would be to just go look for a big corporate parent to fund us? I wouldn't have to work 6-7 days a week. I wouldn't have to work so hard. Do you know how easy it would be to take the money? Do you know how easy it would be to take money from Jeffrey Katzenberg or whomever else people are taking money from these days? Do you know how amazingly, how much less stress I would have in my life if we took corporate money, if we sold out, if I went to David Brock or, whomever, Neera Tanden or the Kochs or name your Neanderthal Democratic Party donor or tech entrepreneur, and I totally sold out, and I said, hey, we're going to do 50 videos a week on how bad Republicans are and how great Biden is and how great Democrats are. Oh my God, do you know how much easier and simpler my life would be? Frankly, we probably would explode on YouTube because they would stop throttling us if we did that. Oh, they wouldn't be hiding our channel if we just became part of the resistance. Do you know how much easier it is to not to sell out? Do you know how much easier it is to get your funding through the usual suspects? Oh my God. But I cannot do it, and I will not do it. I would rather literally sell out, close down the shop, go be some communications PR flack, work a 9-to-5, than ever do that. But I want you to know something. When I ask you for money, it ain't to go to the casino. When I ask you to sign up as a member, it's not so we could profit as a company. It's so we can do the work. It's so we can go out and cover the stories no one else will cover. And I'm not shitting on anybody else in the progressive sandbox. There's a lot of outlets that are asking people sign up, become a member, become a this, become a that. All I'm telling you is I want you to look at us, status quo. Actions speak louder than words. You show me the outlets that are going out and covering stuff in the field. You show me the outlets that are still 7 years later investigating Flint. You show me the outlets that are giving a damn about Amazon workers literally dropping dead. We just did a story on that. Bashan Brown. You show me the outlets that are covering rent strikes, that are covering indigenous people fighting in Minnesota against the Line 3 pipeline. You show me that. Because there are no other outlets doing it. We're the only ones. So I ask you, and I am not beyond begging, sign up, statuscoup.com/join, statuscoup.com/join. Your membership goes a very, very long way. You can become a member, $5 a month. That's 16 cents a day. $5 a month, 16 cents a day. Super, super important. We got to get our membership ticking back up because right now we're losing a lot of members. Part of that is because, frankly, it's been very difficult for me to go in the field. I mean, I have a wife. I don't want to get my wife sick. I don't want to get coronavirus again. There is variants going around, and I don't want to get on a plane right now while we're theoretically close to getting a vaccine. But please, if you can, sign up. It's very easy to do hot takes from a studio and build a channel that way. We do commentary also. It's a lot harder to actually make the effort and dedicate your life to going out and handing a microphone to people that do not have a voice anywhere else. Name me the outlets doing that.